Hey everybody, Demetrius here with another episode of Data Protection Gumbo. And I am super excited to have a fantastic guest on, Leila Golchehreh. And she is the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Relyance. So Leila, welcome to the Gumbo. How are you today?
Oh, thanks, Demetrius. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I am doing great and happy to see you. How are you doing?
I am doing well, just trying to stay cool in all of this heat that's coming through the area. So, global warming is definitely something I think is real. So, let's see if we can stay cool while we're talking about artificial intelligence and AI governance, right?
That's right. And no, agree on all fronts. Some of the most important issues that face our society today are the three that you just mentioned, climate change, privacy and data protection, and AI governance. So excited to be here and dive into these topics that are super relevant.
Absolutely. So, start off by telling us a little bit about the company and yourself as well.
Absolutely. Well, I got started with Reliance and really had a vision of starting a company in this space because I had been an operator in the industry for 15 years. What I found as I was a chief privacy officer and working in data protection for so many different organizations, from large publicly traded ones. I was at Workday for some time, and then I took on roles, including as the first privacy lawyer at the autonomous vehicle company GM Cruise, was a CPO for Adaptive Insights and some healthcare tech companies. And what I repeatedly found was that we were lacking good technology to do true privacy by design.
Hmm.
Everything that I had seen on the market was largely focused on very manual workflows. I would be required to interview engineers and really do data entry based on the responses to the questions that I had to them around data protection. That just seemed
Okay.
crazy to me.
Yeah.
We're going through an AI renaissance right now. Data is moving, shifting, and flowing at breakneck pace. And the way I was building a program was through interviews and forms and surveys. It just seemed
Yeah. Yeah.
ridiculous, Demetrius. And
Yeah.
we needed to understand technology better. And I realized that, and I think largely, Demetrius, because, I grew up in a multicultural home. I had two parents from different backgrounds. My father is originally from Iran, my mom is from the States. And basically, I realized that anytime there was a communication gap or failure, it was largely around a translation issue. They might be on the same page, but the issue was that there was just a language or cultural or other barrier that was preventing them from reaching an agreement. This is just my
Yeah.
parents, right?
Right. Right.
And
Right.
I realized that, not unlike the work I was doing in privacy and data governance, was the issues that I was facing with some of the engineering team as the privacy team. Everyone kind of was marching toward the same direction, right? Almost always. But the issue was we had a translation gap. I was speaking in laws and regulation and contract, and our engineers were speaking in code and infrastructure, databases and
Yeah.
APIs. So,
Yeah.
how do we bring everyone onto the same page? And so that was really the genesis of the company: is we can do privacy, we can do AI governance better, but what we really need is a way to embed in the way that engineering is operating and to learn to
Mhm.
speak the same language. And that language was largely around code. If we can understand code, we can begin to really understand what's going on in the tech stack. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit about how the company got started, and certainly happy to share more.
Yeah, I love that. And the one thing that stood out with me, you said we're going through an AI renaissance. And I think that's really profound, especially since there's really not any hard hitting regulations right now for AI. And we're in the early stages where everyone is talking about it, but nothing has truly been put in place yet. And so governance will be something that's starting to get huge just around understanding the role of how governance plays. But I do want to ask you, just from an AI perspective, we know it's transforming the landscape, but let's zone in a little bit on governance and talk a little bit about what do you see it as far as changing the whole privacy and data protection landscape? And maybe you can provide some examples of AI's impact on maybe the privacy and data protection fields.
No, I totally appreciate the question, Demetrius, and I agree. There's sort of a lot of rumblings around how we're going to regulate AI, but other than the EU AI Act, which I actually do
Mhm.
think serves as a
Okay.
great baseline, we haven't done much in the way of regulation, other than kind of having standards. So we are talking about NIST. There
Okay.
are
Yep.
kind of general frameworks and standards around how to think about AI governance. We have a couple of executive orders around the same in the States, but you're 100% right. We're not fully there. It's still a little bit unclear how we're going to be moving forward with regulation here. So my thoughts on it, to answer your question, we need to understand our existing technology landscape. We have to start as that baseline. And I think with respect to AI, one of the most important things is understanding our how exactly it is that we are processing information. So, not unlike the ways in which we build foundational privacy programs with AI, we need to get a continuous understanding of what's going on in our tech stack.
Mhm.
Once we can have that regular understanding, and that means understanding code, it's understanding third-party vendors that are offering AI within your organization, it's understanding how contracts, which is another integration that Reliance offers, are worded, and how data can be used. Is your data used for training? So I
Yeah.
think right now, as the regulators are kind of wrapping their own heads around AI governance, how do we actually legislate here? It's very important that we get that foundational understanding within our own organizations on how data is expected to be used, and what types of AI technologies are going to be embedded. Because really, from experience, one of the worst things that can happen is that, your engineering team or even one of your business units at an organization are kind of deciding they're going to be adopting AI, as we should be, because it can make us more efficient with the work that we're doing.
Right.
And it's here. But if they don't tell you about it and you don't know about it, and you're learning about this way after the fact, and maybe there was a risky vendor, maybe there were risks that you could have avoided had you have known about them earlier. This is just so important to get ahead of. And one of the ways that Reliance is helping with this is by embedding as an AI and privacy co-pilot within the technology stack, so that we can
Mhm.
get that clear and continuous monitoring and understanding of what AI models are in your environment, how
Mhm.
personal data in particular is being used, how general data is being processed, and alert you to when there are really risks that you need to get ahead of.
Yeah, and you mentioned another key word, co-pilots, right? So everyone is racing to build their own co-pilot so they could maybe introduce a new product, right? A new service, or say, yes, we have our own co-pilot and we are definitely innovating and trying to fit in with everyone else, right? So that's something that everyone is doing. You see all these different flavors
Yeah.
of co-pilots and AI assistants, etc. But let's talk about maybe some of the best practices around integrating AI technologies into, especially your business processes, the ones that you already have in place today, and the whole data protection lever on that, making sure that it's all secure at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Well, I think there are a lot of questions that we need to be asking around generally what AI models are in our environment. So, as
Mhm.
I said, first, I think the first step, Demetrius, is understanding your technology stack. We've
Mhm.
really got to build, we talk about data maps and inventory and the privacy landscape, but I think the reason we're seeing so many privacy professionals go into AI governance is precisely because there are so many overlapping programmatic operational things that need to be done that mirror what we've done for data privacy. So at the outset, I think it's building that data map, understanding exactly what third party vendors are in your environment, what microservices are there, and generally what the code that your team, if you're a technology company, is building looks like. So I think that's foundational, understanding what's going on within your own house. And then you're sending all this information outside of your house to these third party vendors. So I think understanding as well who these third party vendors are, what they're doing with your data is also really key.
Okay.
Understanding how exactly the language in your contracts are worded to address AI. So some companies are just relying on some of the old data processing agreements language that says, if you're a data processor, you're just acting as a processor, you only do what we say.
Mhm.
Other contracts are broader, where they say, we're able to use your information for training purposes. So I think building that foundational understanding of when that is accessible to organizations, when they can be using, whether it's personal data from a privacy perspective or confidential business data from a trade secret or just generally protecting your
Mm,
business perspective,
okay.
also really important to understand. So how is data being used to train? Another key area. The third dimension of this that I think is important is really around, what is the data that you have?
Mhm.
Because there might be, and this is the thing that I actually kind of talk with lawyers about regularly, is we shouldn't just say no to training on data just outright. There are some companies that will just say no, absolutely not. But
Yeah.
we also need to be open minded about the beneficial use cases and how allowing the use of data to train can be good, not only to help with new developments in AI, but potentially for your own business, right? So I don't think it's an outright no to, okay, they're accessing our data, but there's provision in here that says they can train this for their models, where we just say no. I think that
Mhm.
lawyers should actually analyze, okay, what data is going into feeding the model, and should we potentially just say, okay, as long as it's not this kind of personal data, then it's okay. So I
Okay.
think that's another key consideration as companies are kind of evaluating how to address AI governance at the moment. And then I've said the word continuous, I think, a few times,
Mm, mhm.
Demetrius, but I,
Yeah.
I do think that's important. AI is moving so quickly, and your business units, your vendors, your internal engineering teams, if you have them, and any other unit of the business is going to adopt AI for one purpose. But I can guarantee that in almost every case, the usages of that AI, the data that it's accessed, will be changing
Mm,
constantly.
okay.
So I really want to triple click on the need to get that continuous understanding of how AI models are going to be used. And so there are a few ways of doing that. There's personnel and there is technology. So from the personnel perspective, it's really putting in those organizational checks in
Mhm.
order to really have a regular understanding of what's going on. It's setting up operational processes. So, if your vendor is changing anything, you really understand how they're going to be alerting you to those changes and access to your information and their models. And then from the technology perspective, implementing a solution, and I will do a personal plug here for Reliance, but that's
Yeah.
going to really stay on top of changes to code is probably the most important thing you can do, Demetrius.
Mhm.
Obviously I'm biased. I'm a founder, but how else will we really understand what's going on? We're dealing with AI models. Do we really think that our forums or surveys or conversations with people are going to keep up with the pace of AI's development? I mean, it's just
Right,
impossible.
right.
It's just impossible. We have to embrace and embed technology into our environment, because
Mhm.
that's one of the only ways we're really going to be building for AI governance in an ethical way, in a meaningful way, in a way that's going to be up to date and also save the business money. Because these
Okay.
interviews, these form surveys, not only are they really time consuming, but they also, because they're inaccurate, they might lead to an AI breach, right? Or, and now
Yeah.
you've got a much bigger issue on your hands.
That's
So,
not good.
really having
Yeah.
exactly that continuous understanding is critical.
And Layla, you mentioned one thing early on in this response, and you said a data map. Now it sounds simple, it sounds easy. How easy is it to create a data map or build a data map? And what's your definition of a data map?
Great question, Demetrius. So I guess I can start off with just sharing some of my experience. And
Okay.
there's the
Yeah.
easy way of doing this and the hard
Mhm.
way. So I sort of had like I was in the unfortunate position of having to do this the hard way. But I
Okay.
guess,
Yeah.
we should all be grateful for the kind of challenges we've had in our career, because that leads to new opportunities on how to solve them. And sometimes the challenges get so big because you're doing them the hard way that it leads to new ideas, which is exactly what happened with Reliance.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
let me tell you about the hard way to answer
Sure.
your question. So the hard way was trying to interview every single person at the company for every different department and ask them what they're doing with data, how it's being accessed, what's being done to it, filling out forms. Nobody liked the question. Engineers were avoiding me in hallways. This was just the way that it was going. And it took me 6 months. It cost about half a million each
Oh,
time,
wow.
not to mention all the additional time. And that was just of like lawyer time and privacy team
Mhm,
time,
mhm.
not to mention the disruption to the business because I have to tell them to stop what you're doing. Please answer the questions I have about which vendors are you using? What data are
Okay,
you
yeah.
accessing? Are you sure this is up to date?
Mhm.
Imagine going through that for every business with every individual asking questions around everything they're doing. And then on top of it, reading contracts as a human to understand this. I mean,
Mm,
not only, and this is where, I know that there's a lot of controversy around what's going on with AI right now. I appreciate that. We are
yeah.
going through a very, very disruptive time in technology's development. We're going through a disruptive time in AI. But there are very, very positive use cases for AI where AI can be used for good. One of the ways in which that can happen, Demetrius, is when we're building AI for privacy and governance.
Okay,
I
yeah.
feel really passionately about this subject because I recognize that AI may take some jobs. There's no
Mhm.
doubt about it. It is definitely said to disrupt jobs. And then there are jobs that really need to be automated because the jobs weren't being done well or accurately in the first place. And they're, to reference your previous, comments around, climate change and privacy, these are some of the fundamental issues that we face as a society. And we cannot do it alone without the development and assistance of new technologies. So, in effect, I think that, if we can solve for this by really getting an understanding that is continuous of the technology stack, really embedding within that area, we're going to be able to build AI for good in a really positive way.
Mm,
So, what
okay.
cost me a half a million and was really disruptive to our business, was disruptive to teams, and was very time consuming, all these interviews, forms, and surveys, guess what happens the moment you're done asking
Yeah.
someone a question about the data that they're using, right?
Mm, mhm.
It is immediately obsolete. As
Okay.
soon as you're done with the interview, the data has changed, the model
Mhm.
has changed. And when that's happening in the technology stack and we don't have a co-pilot embedded within that technology stack, we suddenly realize that all that work we had put in needs to be redone.
Mm,
It's just not
okay.
efficient. So that's the hard way. So let's talk about the easy way.
Okay.
That is through the use of AI. What took me 6 months, cost me a half a million, is now being done in 4 to 5 hours with our AI copilot
Okay. Yeah.
through integrations into the key areas of your technology stack and business that are super intelligent because they largely reflect, Demetrius, the interview experience that not only I personally had, but that chief privacy officers, privacy teams, data governance, and security teams have. And instead of going team by team by team, carrying out those interviews, what we can finally do for the first time is use and leverage our AI copilot to do those integrations and then build a continuous, updated, live, real time data map and inventory that is going to serve as the foundation for data protection, privacy, security, AI governance, and other areas.
Wow. Half a mil no, no, you said half a million, right?
Half a mil, and that's a
And
minimum. Yeah, and that's like
please.
that's not even that statistic I'm quoting is like
Mhm.
really the median.
Like,
So if you're a large publicly traded company, this gets incredibly expensive,
mm,
just across the board, and you have to do it all the time. So every six
mm.
months, half a mil. That's a mil a year at least, just for the data map and inventory alone. Very, very costly, Demetrius.
So, Layla, what does that conversation look like with a, let's say, and who are you mostly having a conversation with? Is it the CISO or is it the CEO or the CIO or maybe even an engineer? Maybe not an engineer, but because I know someone would have to have large pockets and approvals, and they would have to really sit at a higher level where they could actually make a decision here. But what does that conversation look like if you are trying to convince someone that, hey, you really need to take a look at this and you really need to take advantage of this particular co-pilot so that you could further understand and increase the efficiency of your business and just really, really, really lean into gaining as much as you can from your business and also pulling from AI and making sure it's governed properly as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Demetrius. So I think there are a couple of questions embedded in the question you asked. I
Yeah.
do think this goes to the level of the CEO.
Okay. Yeah.
AI is just too important, and if the leader of the company does not understand what's going on in your own environment, we already have a problem. So
Hmm.
I do think that this needs to be escalated to the level of the CEO. I've written blogs around this and
Okay.
done talks around the same, that both data protection and AI, especially with respect to AI governance, need to be discussed at the board level. That's the only way to build an effective program. If you don't have executive buy-in, then what are you doing at that company?
Yeah.
I mean, that is
Yeah.
fundamentally, what are we doing here? You have to have the support of leadership.
I love that. And before I let you go, maybe one more question here. I'm truly enjoying what we're talking about here. And we always have to jump to the future, right? So the future of where is AI headed, where is governance and privacy headed. And so looking forward, how do you envision the role of AI in governance, privacy, and data protection evolving?
I love this question, Demetrius. I think that a lot of lawyers and other folks that don't necessarily have technical backgrounds have been living in the space. And one of the major evolutionary developments that I can see and I think is so critical is that all of us up level our technical knowledge and understanding. The way of the past simply will not work as we undergo this AI renaissance. We have to get an understanding of how a technology stack operates, what technology infrastructure looks like, and how engineers operate. Unless and until we can get that understanding, we're always going to be running 100 steps behind what the engineers are doing. So I am not saying that we all need to go out and get CS degrees. I mean, if you have the opportunity to do that, I am in strong support. But I do think we all need to get at least a basic understanding of a technology architecture at the organization that we're supporting, get an understanding of where data lives across that organization, and understand those technical initiatives. So, whenever there's an opportunity to sit in on sprint planning meetings or join engineers as they are, or product team members when they're planning, it's so critical that data protection and AI governance professionals really take part in those discussions. If you're not really sitting at the table, you're going to be kind of running behind that team. I don't want to say you're getting eaten for breakfast. I think that's the expression, right? You're on the
Yeah.
menu or something.
Right.
But I think the key point is you need a seat at the table and you need to build those relationships. So the teams that are embracing new technologies will be open to coming in and talking with you. And I think, at least with Reliance AI, our vision is to embed in the way that the business is operating so we're not disrupting it. We
Mm.
shouldn't be seen as disrupting business. We need to be seen as a partner that understands what the business is trying to accomplish, and we are layering in a critical step of governance and data protection that the business really should embrace. So the way to do that is up leveling our technical skill set and knowledge, and really getting that understanding of how to not disrupt the teams but embed as a partner within them.
Well, awesome. And how can someone actually go and find anything that you have written or maybe even check out more details about Reliance?
Absolutely. Well, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to connect. I write pretty regularly on the topic, so happy to connect there. And then on our site at Reliance with a Y, RELYANCE.ai, they can certainly learn more information about the company as well.
Okay, well, we really appreciate the time that we've spent with you learning more about AI and governance and privacy. And also, my favorite part is the data map conversation and just learning more about that as well. And before I let the Gumbo listeners go, I also want to put a plug in for the LinkedIn group that we have. There's about 26,000 of us in that group. It's called Backup and Recovery Professionals. And there are professionals such as myself. We're all having conversations around governance and backup and storage and cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and lots of different interesting topics, similar to the ones we're having here on Data Protection Gumbo. So, Leila, thank you so much for being a guest. and we really appreciate it. All right.
Well, thank you so much, Demetrius. So grateful to be here. Really enjoy your podcast, and it's really just a pleasure.